righty. Thank you, Todd. I hope everyone's doing well. Welcome to the orbiting Bacon space station. I hope you're all safe and well wherever you may be. So I'm thrilled to be here. I absolutely love the work that Todd and the team do. I love all things open. It's a real bummer that we're not going to be there in person in Austin today, but it's so awesome the fact that we're all here to get together virtually. It's the truest essence of community. So I'm going to talk today for about 15 minutes, and you don't have to know a lot about open source to get a lot out of this, but every one of you is going to influence a community in some way. You may join a community, you may start a community, it doesn't really matter. And I think this will be very, very relevant to you. So as a little bit of backstory, I was raised in a place in Northern England. It was very boring and it was very picturesque, okay? It looked a little bit like this. And when I was growing up, I heard the same thing over and over again. People don't really know their neighbors like they did back in the good old days. My parents, my grandparents, everybody waffled on and on about how the sense of community was kind of dying and leaving. And this wasn't my experience. You know, when I was like 18 or 19 years old, I looked like this. This is a picture a friend of mine, Stuart, and I dug up while at the pub just before the coronavirus. And I started a website called Linux UK, which looked a little bit like this. And this was designed to kind of get people in the UK together. This was back in 1998. And I was just excited about meeting other open source people. I went to university, started a Linux user group called Wolverhampton Linux User Group, and then met some people there and got interested in a project called KDE. So organized a booth down at a conference in London. You can see the printed out bits of paper and iron-on decals on t-shirts and things like that. And then down at that conference, ended up bumping into a couple of guys in a pub who started a magazine called Linux Format Magazine. And I said to them, do you mind if I write an article for you? And they said, sure, but if it's terrible, we won't publish it, which seemed like reasonable terms. So anyway, I started talking about a place that just opened up near where I lived called Open Advantage, which provided free training and consulting to people who were upskilling into open source, who used to work in factories and manufacturing. And that led me out to go and fly around the world and meet people at conferences. I got interested in the GNOME project and kicked off a project called Jacosha. And then that led to building a community around that particular project. The whole reason why I'm going through this condensed biography is because when I kept hearing this, people don't know their neighbors like they did back in the good old days, I wasn't seeing it. I was seeing this amazing group of people all over the world who come together. And this is what's so exciting about this to me, is that community is out there and it's thriving. What is happening right now is a good example of this. And what this is this international network of minds who come together to share experience and talent and expertise. And open source, I think, is a wonderful example of this. So it's not just my experience. We've seen the growth of Wikipedia. We've seen open source dominating every possible industry, from the cloud to infrastructure to devices. We've seen the maker revolution happen. Many of you will have kids who are making things, who are creating interesting little inventions, which is unlocking their creativity. We've seen the democratization of funding with crowdfunding. And it's not just these areas. We've seen Salesforce and SAP build communities of over 1 million members. Harley-Davidson, over 1,700 local user groups. Lego allow their community members to make Lego sets. IGN bring gamers together. Hit Record allows people to work together on productions that many of which have been shown at Sundance. So there's so much community excitement going on out there. And to me, it gets back to this network of minds, is that we're stronger together, is that when we unlock that potential, we can really get out there and do almost anything. But to me, what's really exciting about this is open source. This is what got me into it. And this, to me, is one of the finest examples of what makes community so powerful. And one of the reasons why open source works so well is that we're able to get together and share the same material. Like there can be somebody, I'm here in California on the orbiting space station, and there may be someone out there in Warsaw and we could both work on exactly the same project. We can have the same content, the code, the documentation. We can coordinate online events now. We have the ability to work together effectively. So in this session, I want to walk through some things that I've learned over the course of my career that I think are relevant to any of you who are getting interested in communities. It doesn't matter whether you want to set up a local group about open source in your town, or whether you want to start an open source project or join an open source project. It doesn't require having a ton of experience. These are 3 things I think are important for you to bear in mind. The first one is that the best experiences are journeys, okay? If any of you have been at Disney World, when you show up and you park your car and you buy your tickets and that you go in through the gate and then they guide you around the park and how the restaurants open and serve the right amount of traffic, everything is carefully curated. If you look at great restaurants, from how you show up and they pour you water and they bring you the menus and then you order from the menu and they bring you it at the right cadence, everything is carefully orchestrated. Video games are another example. I just bought Luigi's Mansion 3 for my son recently, and we were both playing it. The first couple of levels are very, very carefully designed for you to pick up the controls and feel a sense of accomplishment. Here's the thing. Your community needs to be more than this. It needs to be more than just a GitHub repo. It needs to be more than just a meetup page. It needs to be more than just the basics of you being on the internet. It needs to be the whole experience in how we build that journey out. Now, you may be thinking, okay, Jono, how on earth do we do that? Well, this is how I would recommend it. And this is one of the things Todd mentioned. I got this book, People Powered. This is how I would recommend you approach it. And I covered this in the book. The first thing we do is we understand who our audience is. You know, do we want to attract developers, event organizers? Do we want people to use our software or come to our events? And then we design an onboarding experience that's really simple for them to do something that's valuable for them. So if they want to join your community and ask a question and get an answer, that's an onboarding experience. If they want to contribute their first bit of code to an open source project, that's their onboarding experience. The point is that we simplify this because you can go and do as much promotion as you want in the whole world. And if they all come through the front door and no one knows how to get started, then they're kind of screwed, okay? So think about what are the 5 or 6 steps that they need to go through from learning about your community to how they do something that's valuable for them. Now what we do is we break them into 3 phases of a journey. I call them casual, regulars, and core. So when you're casual, you kind of new, you don't really know what's going on. Just think about when you first joined Open Source 101 today. You didn't really know anyone. This whole new platform is a little bit weird and kind of unusual. It's cool, but it's different, right? There's a lot of insecurity. A lot of people experience imposter syndrome, especially people who are in underrepresented groups can especially find this a really difficult phase to kind of get into. So we need to make this really simple for them to get started in. When people are regulars, this is where they've been around for a couple of months and they're hanging out and they've kind of got to know people. And then the core members are the people who are just super engaged. They're like the people who are just incredibly passionate about your community. So in the casual phase, you really want to focus on the access and the relationships, help people to have simple and effective problem solving, be able to build relationships effectively, provide plenty of training, webinars and programs, instructional blog posts and other different bits and pieces, maybe some formal mentoring. This is really powerful to help simplify how people settle into the pool that is your community. Now, for the regulars, this is all about collaboration. You've got these people who are pretty excited about how all of this stuff works. And what you want to make sure is that you can unlock their creativity, encourage people to maybe set up new projects and new events, matchmake people to work in new areas of your community. For example, let's say you're running a local group in your town and there's some community members who live in another town that's nearby. Maybe encourage them to organize another group there, have competitions and hackathons. It's about enabling them to have the confidence to go and do these interesting things. And then for the core people, this is about tapping into their wisdom. Here's a tip, right? No matter what you're doing, whether you're building products or software or building communities, the answers to all of your questions live in the heads of your audience, okay? And we want to tap into that. And our core members have got so much expertise they can share. So share regular one-on-one sessions with them, involve them in the design and the planning of your future community projects, bring them into a channel where they can discuss these things. It's all about unlocking that creativity. So this is the journey that I recommend. And one of the things we do to keep people moving forward is we apply a series of incentives, which I'm going to get to a little bit later on. But what I do want to focus on before I get to that is the second area. And this is that we design for people, right? It's easy, especially in open source, for us to talk about technology and computers and machines and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, there's a human psychology that we need to understand. And the way it looks a little bit like this is that when you join any community or any group, and this happened today, first of all, you have access to it. You need to get access to go and participate. Then when you start contributing and doing some interesting things, you kind of get a sense of how it works. It starts building some self-respect that you can figure this stuff out, that you can understand this new world that you're entering into. When this happens over and over again, you keep contributing, you keep building that self-respect, it builds a sense of dignity. And this means that you really feel like you've got some worth in this community that you're a part of. And then that gives you the confidence to have an impact. That means you can think bigger and you think of new and interesting ideas and propose things that haven't been done before without worrying about, people kind of knocking you down. When this happens over and over again, it builds a sense of belonging. And this is the ultimate treasure in any community, any workplace, any family, is that you feel part of something. And that if you were to go away, you'd be missed. Okay. The key thing here is access and belonging. We start with access, make sure people have got equal access to join your community, and focus on all the different pieces that they need to go through to get to that point of belonging. Always be focused on this human psychological element, because if you forget this, you're just basically tweaking software. Okay. The tricky thing here is that there are millions of things out there that can distract us away from people coming to your communities. This is an actual photo taken inside of a human brain. This is how much junk we've got in our brains, right? The Tiger King, good example. So what makes people want to try something new? It's very simple, is that it provides clear value. It does something really relevant and interesting to them. So for example, Firefox, right? They make it very clear why you should use their browser. These are the benefits of using it. The Cloud Native Computing Foundation makes it very clear about what they do to bring value to the infrastructure space. Okay. So that's one thing that's really important, to focus on what is the value that someone's going to get out of your community, whether it's your group, your open source project, or something else. And then the third thing that I want to touch on here is incentives. We are, as human beings, really incentivizable, and we're all guilty of this, right? We collect we used to collect airline miles until there was no airplanes anymore. We get Reddit karma. We collect these little stamps on coffee cards. When you get your 10th stamp, you get free coffee. We collect video game trophies and badges and Fitbit and places like that. And what's awesome about this is that if we see something that's interesting, we're willing to work for it. And the reason for that is that psychologically, we're hunter-gatherers, right? Is that we're always wanting to make sure we can protect ourselves and have enough sustenance and food and all that kind of stuff. And this is just wired into our brains, because our brains really haven't had an upgrade in a long time. Now, there's two ways in which you can approach these incentives. One is called stated and one is called submarine. So for the stated incentives, what you do is you say, if you do this thing, you will get this thing. Okay. So for example, GitHub has a game off, and this is where if you participate in the competition, you will get the prizes in the competition. HackerOne has got a leaderboard where if you go and participate in it, you may get particular rewards based upon the reputation that you've generated. Many of you may be familiar with Stack Overflow. If you do a certain thing, you get one of these badges, such as if your question is favorited by 25 people, you get the favorite question badge. So I think wire into your community lots of these specific things. Okay, give very clear incentives that if you do this great work, or if you demonstrate the behavior that we want to see, you will be rewarded in some way. And this doesn't have to be swag. It can be just a thank you. It can be public recognition. It's more about the incentive and the reward and the recognition. The other type of incentive here is what I call a submarine. And these are kind of the sneaky cousin. These are the most fun ones to put together. And essentially what you do is you use computers to to detect when someone's done something that you want to happen, and then you reward them in a very human way. So to give you an example, one of the things I often do with my clients is when they reach a particular trust level in a platform called Discourse, we recognize them publicly. We say, thank you for their amazing contributions. We highlight them. We often send them a swag kit. And it's because they've contributed consistently to a particular point that we've measured. Another example of this is our friends at opensource.com. When people have contributed a certain amount of content to their website, they will send people swag. Mattermost will send people mugs with their name written on it when they submit their first contribution. And another example of this at opensource.com is when people have contributed a lot, they'll actually fly people out to Raleigh, where they'll join a day of meetings to work on opensource.com and what it means and how it can be grown. But they'll also get to go to All Things Open, and they'll get to meet people like Jim Whitehurst, who was the CEO of Red Hat and is now the president of IBM. This network of minds is amazing, okay? And we're only just beginning to tap into the potential here. So I'd encourage you to go and think about these things and what it means for your community. And then just to very briefly wrap up, as I mentioned earlier on, I've got a new book out. It's called People Powered. Thrilled it just won an award recently at the Business Book Awards, and it's got pretty decent reviews on Amazon and Goodreads, and it's a bestseller. So go and check out the book. And what might be relevant to you is I've set up a page for this event. If you go to jonobacon.com/pack and pop in your email address, I'll send you 2 copies of the book sorry, two chapters from the book, both in print and in audiobook. We'll send you a PDF in the audiobook. I'm also gonna send you a whole bunch of templates and then some video, kind of additional video training and guidance that might be useful to you as well. All right, and with that, I'm gonna check out. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and stay safe. Thank you.